You're listening to Errol Parker and Clancy Overall, editors of the Batuta Advocate, on Desert Rock FM.
Well, welcome back to the Batuta Advocate radio show, recording live here from Desert Rock FM studios. You're joined by myself, Clancy Overall, editor of the Batuta Advocate, and Errol Parker. How are you, Errol?
Yeah, good to be back on the microphone for 2023. We had a bit of a break over the summer. Yeah, no, the silly season's about to finish, or the start if you've worked in hospitality for the whole of summer, like many thousands of people have done around the country.
Yeah, it's, for the most part, I guess the hospo workers will have their time in the sun or their time in the beer garden. But the rest of us, it's time to start focusing on those New Year's resolutions we made halfway through the silly season. You know, the winter codes will kick off and everyone will become a bit more sports mad. And on top of all that, it's time to focus on health and well-being and just getting on with the year. Now, today's guest, Martin Stark, is a real advocate for health and well-being. And I say that because you don't often meet someone who actually works in health and well-being. It's usually health or it's well-being. But what you're doing, Martin, is the two of those things. You're advocating both, fitness and improving your physical health, as well as people's well-being and their self-worth and equality, effectively. And you've managed to do this through founding the World Gay Boxing Championships, which I believe is about to be inaugural.
Yeah, we've got 1 month to go until the world's first boxing competition for the LGBTQ plus community and allies. It's been an eventful 3.5 years since I had a crazy idea. Why not just organise a boxing tournament, thinking not going to be too much hard work. Yeah. And it's taken the best part of my life for the last 3.5 years.
You're a boxing promoter, by the way. It's a career that often is associated with organised crime. Did you find yourself delving into the dark arts of hosting an event where people engage in combat sports in front of bloodthirsty fans?
Well, I applied for my boxing promoter's license a few months ago, so this is my first event. So I'm thinking the crimes are going to be, it's like if you're going to have a homophobic slur or you're going to be putting somebody down, you've got mass supporters there who are going to be waving rainbow flags to get you out of there. And the only thing that's welcome is people. The only thing we don't welcome is hate. So
I look forward to it. It's going to be. I've been to many boxing events, as Errol, and quite often there's an animosity in the room. But this one's going to be all love, I think.
There's certainly going to be the animosity between because people want to win the world title. You know, we're giving world titles. But this is all about love and acceptance. And I think one of the misnomers about boxing is people don't understand the spirit of boxing at your local boxing gym. When you're sparring for the first time, the coach in your corner, there's a lot of support and love. There's still get in there, get and do it. But there's so much support in the boxing community.
Quite an egalitarian environment, would you find, in the boxing gym?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, certainly the gyms I've trained at, belonged to, very much have been welcomed. I think there are still some stigmas about game by men boxing, and I think those are the barriers that I want to remove. It's also about a gym making an environment feel welcome. You may not feel that your environment is not welcome, but if I was sparring and somebody called me a faggot, would you say something? Or is it's banter, it's okay, you have to put up with it. So
I mean, that's sport. It's one of the great problems that sport has in this day and age is, as we often see in the media, is kind of weeding out this kind of banter, as it would be described.
Yeah, you were saying that this road has taken you 3 years to get to basically the start of. Yeah. How do you go about starting your own boxing competition?
You start out by just sharing your vision and communicating. Whenever you have a dream, just start communicating this is what you want to do. The second thing was forming a not-for-profit association. So have an excellent board, people who are skilled in various activities and with professional backgrounds to actually go and do something like this. The third is to start building relationships. I've never done boxing, anything like this before, but I reached out to people within the boxing community who run events, who provide referees and judges. So that's how I started, and that's how I'd recommend anybody to get started. Communicate, find people to help you, and build those relationships.
So you were saying that you didn't come from a boxing type of background. What drew you to boxing initially?
So my story really dates back to 2006. I had gallstones blocking my liver, and I had an undiagnosed rare autoimmune disease. I had a procedure to try and remove some gallstones. Dye seeped into my pancreas, and I went into admission into ICU. I had severe acute pancreatitis, my lungs had collapsed, and I went into septic shock. So I was placed in 2 induced comas. My second induced coma prior to that, I lived through my worst fear. This is my normal voice when I speak, not through my diagram. So I had a tracheotomy. And I remember thinking, am I going to die? Struggling to breathe, but the strength of the people around me as they were performing the tracheotomy. Fast forward to the end of 2017, I have Addison's disease. It's what JFK had.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's a very presidential illness condition.
My body doesn't produce cortisol, and I've been admitted to hospital 70 times in the last 17 years. I was in hospital a couple of weeks ago, but I almost died again at the end of 2017.
From Addison's? From
Addison's.
And can you just explain, because a lot of people don't realise this about JFK, that it is a debilitating illness, and because he was always about making appearances, and I guess people with Addison's can't often do that. What happens? It slows you down. You go through bouts, or
you go through bouts. So we think about cortisol as the stress hormone. There are 3 types of stress: psychological, emotional, and physical stress. Now, in any environment of stress, your body will produce more cortisol. Mine doesn't. People with Addison's disease take replacement cortisol. If you have a cold or a chest infection, your body will produce more cortisol. Mine doesn't. So when I'm getting sick, I can get very sick very quickly. You go into what's called an adrenal crisis. So I take my hydrocortisone twice a day. To JFK constantly would have been in that pressure environment. So
imagine how much he was doing during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's definitely something in terms of health and well-being that you have to be on every day.
Absolutely. It's a few weeks ago, quite unwell, and ended up calling the ambulance. So within 50 minutes, ambulance arrived. They started giving me fluids, an emergency injection of hydrocortisone. They were also giving me some glucose to eat because my blood sugar had gone quite low level down. Those actions probably prevented me from being in hospital about 3 or 4 days. Straight to emergency, more fluids, stay overnight, and I'm discharged the next day. In 2017, it was so severe, they took me straight into the resuscitation section of emergency. My pulse was below 40. It took 20 times my normal dose to stabilise me. So in my mind, I'm thinking, I know what's next. It's back in those induced comas. Or am I going to die?
Just horror.
Just horror. So my background is I had a few self-defense classes to try and overcome the PTSD. I had a boxing class, and it's really
so it is. You'd say I've never thought of that. I mean, I'd imagine self-defense would help people with PTSD, who's someone who might have encountered a physical kind of incident or kind of an attack or something like that. But the PTSD of your illness at that time, the comas and that kind of stuff, it also helps the self-defense.
It did for me because I was able to be in an environment where I was completely uncomfortable and discovered something I could do quite well. And just hitting the pads, hitting the bags in an environment where you can just channel that energy. The first time I did shadow boxing, I realised that I mattered more than I was giving myself credit for. Because I thought,
not made of glass.
If you hit me, it's fine. That was how I was telling myself, but I was realised that I'm not always going to be as strong as what everybody else thinks I am or what I probably think I should be. And I mattered more than I was giving myself credit for.
And you kind of learnt your own capabilities and your own strength, I guess.
Absolutely, my sport at school was swimming, and I was a very good swimmer. I could never kick a ball. I could never throw a ball. I was always the last one to be picked at school sports. Would never have considered boxing whatsoever. But imagine if I'd had the opportunity, or said you could do this, and I was encouraged. I would have really enjoyed boxing maybe in my teens and early 20s, and I'm almost 50. I'm 29 in gay years, but I'm in 50 in a few years' time.
It's an interesting point because you're talking about pathways here for boxing. Young gay kids should be just as encouraged to get involved, because I'm not sure where you grew up. In almost any town in the world, the kids that are boxing are usually the troubled kids, or the kids that actually, someone in the community suggests this kid probably needs to learn to look after himself a bit like that. And it's not really encouraged, amongst even girls or, anyone else outside of the mould of someone at that age as a teenager. It's usually something for a kid who's naughty or something for a kid who needs to channel his energy outside of causing trouble.
And it's interesting, when I grew up in the UK, I would have associated boxing with the private schools.
Yeah, right.
Because it was seen as, if you went...
Oxford Blues,
Oxford Blues, tough... Something I never considered. And what I love in Australia is how boxing is that grassroots community sport. Yeah. The PCYCs and boxing does provide that avenue, that opportunity for people to be taken outside their comfort zone and seeing what's possible for themselves. But it wasn't until 2010 that women could compete in boxing in New South Wales.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, I did not know it was that recent.
Well, and it was also... because I'd say that boxing, particularly at the PCYC gyms, it gave these kids an opportunity to punch a cop without any repercussions whatsoever. Yeah. So I think that really contributed to its explosion in popularity once the PCYCs came on board with it.
You see that too with boxing. You see the different waves. Right now there's a kid, and I can't remember his name. I watched Harry Garside fight him. There's a kid out of Blacktown, who's now the pride of the Sudanese community. And you see the different waves over the years. Billy the Kid Dib, and all of these different identities that kind of come from, working families, grassroots level. It's a great thing for an immigrant kid to just wander in the door one day and find something he loves. But, you're saying that wasn't really available to you as a young gay kid.
I never even considered it.
Yeah.
I'm sure there was a boxing club where I grew up had those opportunities. It was never a consideration. There are two barriers I really want to achieve. One is for the LGBTQ plus community to consider boxing and other sports for them, but also remove the barriers within the sport to stop the discrimination, to support people so they can participate in the sport.
I mean, is that something you're thinking about, the lack of participation right now? If you just say it to me as, an outsider who's, not a gay person, I would think that the biggest issue would be what we spoke about earlier with the banter and the kind of the macho attitudes that have existed in gyms for millennia being an unpleasant place for a gay person. But have you found there's also a stigma from the gay community as well about boxing and why they wouldn't get involved?
So the conversations I've had with other people in the community the last few years, people just, I would never consider it for me. It's the things I probably thought about the sport. So there's that stigma to remove.
Yeah.
And I want to challenge people who think banter, homophobic, racist comments, jokes is banter. People confuse banter with camaraderie.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. When I had my first fight, I had a yellow mohawk, rainbow flag, walked out to Relaxed by Frankie Goes to Hollywood, went back with my coach, and I was at an event a couple of years ago, and I still had yellow hair, and a very good friend of mine just came and said, nobody would think you're a gay guy here because you have yellow hair.
Yeah.
It knew him really well. It was just really funny.
Yeah.
But if I'd been at that event and somebody said, look at that faggot there with the yellow hair, he may have thought that was funny.
Or something which they actually think is innocent, like, oh, you're such a good fighter, I didn't think you could be gay.
Yeah.
We can see the line, and people know the line.
They do.
Yeah.
They do.
Tell me, though, why hasn't it happened before? Why do you think it hasn't happened before? Because Sydney Convicts is a great example of this kind of reclaiming a sport. The gay rugby team in Sydney, that they play in the Sydney comp, and they're, the burliest, biggest, well-groomed rugby footballers you'll ever see in your life, and they're quite a competitive team, and, it's been a great avenue for gay kids getting into rugby, is the Convicts. What do you think? Not so much, we've just explained the pathways and the kind of the lack of participation, but something like the competition. Surely there's got to be a whole community of blokes like you around the world.
So there are LGBTQ boxing clubs all over the world.
Yeah.
One started in Melbourne last year called the Uppercats, and they train on a Saturday morning. There's a local club in Sydney called the Sydney Hookers. Yeah. In London, there's Knockout London. There are different clubs in New. So there have been a few events. There have been LGBTQ fight nights in London. I just don't think anybody has done it to the extent that I want to achieve. If we think the gay games started 41 years ago.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
And it's always been about inclusion. It doesn't matter. You don't have to be LGBTQ plus. You can come along and participate in the sport.
Yeah.
I just think nobody's ever done it. I also think boxing is a sport where the participants change the sport. Think what Muhammad Ali achieved outside of the ring.
Yeah.
Think what women have achieved in the last 30 years in boxing. It was only last year that women headlined boxing at the O2 Arena and Madison Square Gardens.
Yeah. 2022.
2022. Women still have a lot of barriers
Yeah.
in sport. We're talking about equity. I think in women's boxing, it's still 2-minute rounds.
Yeah.
Let's talk about moving it to 3-minute rounds.
It is interesting because I thought combat sports are probably the best at weaving men's and women's participation because in its essence, there's something in combat sports where they realise different horses for different courses. You know what I mean? Weight divisions. You could look at people, and you look at people on social media making fun of the women cricketers or the women footballers about how they're not as good as the men, or they can't kick as far as the men, or they can't do this and that. But that's not really a conversation in combat sports because we've got weight division. We don't put a bantamweight against Mike Tyson.
No.
You know,
No.
you play to your field and you play to your strength and your size, which I always thought there was a... Maybe it's just in modern day boxing in Australia, but you do see the headline or the card split between men and women now, and people understand that women boxing is just like watching any other weight division.
It's been that gradual change.
Yeah.
I think there's been a step change in the last 11 years since women were able to compete in boxing at the Olympics.
Yeah. You think that was the kind of...
I think that was you look about Nicola Adams, what she achieved, double Olympic gold medalist. She retired undisputed boxing champion. So many women have achieved so much.
Yeah.
In really a short period of time, like boxing has been around before, the modern Olympics.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I would have thought it was Clint Eastwood in $1 Million Baby was a big accelerant too in female boxing. That was kind of when it also hit the mainstream there. But the idea of a World Gay Boxing Championships, you've put it out there. How much was the uptake? Did they rush? Did all these clubs rush to you? Or?
So it was, how do I talk about the journey? It was reaching people that I didn't know were friends or were already involved in the sport. So it was reaching the different boxing clubs. Also the friends I've made within the Australian boxing community. I have a person, there's a member of my gym or club who's LGBTQ+. So people were already there, but they may not have had that opportunity.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of activism. I've spoken out against racism. I've spoken out against homophobia in sport. I want to stop the activism and just enjoy the sport. I think we're a good 10, 11, probably 10 years away at least until the need for having an LGBTQ boxing competition will exist.
So that's your dream, to make it redundant?
Yeah.
That's an interesting mission statement.
Well, somebody else may take this on in a future
Yeah.
stage. I think there'll always be LGBTQ affinity sport, but I want the reason I set this up to no longer exist.
Yeah. Where has the most interest come from? And where are you finding these established LGBT communities?
I'm getting a lot of interest from Africa.
Yeah,
we
right.
have a lot of boxers in Africa who want to come out here and compete.
Yeah.
And there's been interest from people of all ages. Somebody in the late 60s wanted to come.
The Gay Masters.
Yeah, it's just been remarkable. I do want to call out the World Boxing Council.
Yep.
When I first approached them for a statement of support, within 2 days I was getting a letter and a video. And last year they published on their website that they're proud to be an LGBTQ plus ally and support the World Gay Boxing Championships. And the statement wasn't just one of those, there's nothing to it. They talked about people facing discrimination, people facing persecution, how participatory sport is a key intervention strategy.
Yeah.
So to get that visible support...
They just got it from the mark.
Yeah.
It's amazing how fast it's moved, really.
Yeah.
Because you say it started 3 years ago.
Yeah.
But
Well,
that was
yeah.
3 years ago in pandemic years.
Yeah.
Basically 1 year ago. And all of a sudden, we're going down to Randwick Racecourse. Is this where you're hosting
So
this?
we're looking around Randwick. That's where we want to host it at the moment. We've got a few. One of the hardest things about the boxing is like all of the registrations, getting people things in. So
And the insurance and all that stuff.
there's so much to go into it.
Well, you gave a shout out to the Boxing Council. We'll give a shout out now to Peter Volandis. If there's any man that can make this thing happen at Randwick Racecourse, it's you, Mr. Sydney. I want to talk though about what's happening around this. There's something, I believe, called World Pride Month.
So Sydney World Pride.
Sydney
which
World
is-
Pride.
And Mardi Gras starts 17th of February. If I get
Yeah.
the date wrong, LGBTQ plus people, give me a break. It's probably the sparring until around the 5th or 6th of March. I want to talk about the origins of Pride.
Yeah, please.
So in the first Pride March, you think about the Stonewall Inn in New York City.
Yep.
The prejudice people were getting every single day, and the whole community, trans women of colour, black people, the whole trans community came out. We stand for this. We don't want to be persecuted anymore. I mean, that went on for a period of time. And then I think it was the Christopher Day Street Parade started the year later. It started out as a protest about human rights and equality. And it's been 50 plus year journey for people to still have the right to exist in an environment where they receive dignity, courtesy, respect. So Pride has always been about human rights, but it's also a celebration.
Yeah.
You know, we invite people to join us. I was in the Mardi Gras parade last year. To my left, Harry Garside.
Yep.
To my right, Charlie Hall, who's a WBC ambassador champion. Fantastic.
Yeah. NRL, AFL, everyone's kind of getting on board now with a float. And I mean, even last year we had the second kind of ever rugby league footballer to come out in the shape of Toby Rudolph 20 years after Ian Roberts. Do you feel like the Pride community is fighting for those people?
Yeah, I believe now the hate is harder.
Yep.
I think I call this period the great pushback.
Yep.
When somebody describes something as woke, my question is, how are you defining that? For me, wokery is just an excuse for what freedom of speech because you're going to be a bigot.
Yeah.
For me, it's about being against discrimination, being against homophobia, being against racism. Let's just raise awareness, but let's start making these changes happen.
The internet, it's kind of accelerated a lot of things that maybe you would have only heard on the street.
So at the end of the 2021 English Premier League season, the Professional Footballers Association issued a report. So this is not just the Premier League players, some of the other players in the other divisions.
Yeah.
2 out of every single player had received online abuse.
Yeah.
Of that abuse, a third of that contained homophobia.
Yeah.
And I remember when football would be on the weekends, and there was no social media, there was no internet. There's just this barrier now.
Yeah.
And I think we just need to work through that, get the voices out there, and come and join us at World Pride. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. You're going to have main events. You've got...
There's no way you could not have a good time there.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
No, like they only shut the Sydney Harbour Bridge for events like this maybe a few times a decade.
Yeah.
So what's happening in Sydney? And tell me a little bit about the global community. Like, are we getting every hotel, Airbnb? Is it one of those kind of events? Is it like
I believe
an expo?
so. Every couple of years, the city gets the rights to host what's called World Pride.
Yep.
So it's been held in New York, in London, I think Washington DC, Barcelona. So it's the first time it's been held in the Southern Hemisphere. So you're going to have people coming out to enjoy. There's a human rights conference. There's a big arts festival. There's a big sports festival. You have the traditional Mardi Gras events. It's still the Mardi Gras parade.
So they've timed it together?
Perfectly.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
There's going to be a beach party at Bondi. Opening it. But it's just going to be... Every city will have their own Pride event, but this is the World Pride event. So it's a real focus point for Australia just to show how welcoming we are. You know, it's the biggest event in Sydney since the 2000 Olympics.
Yeah, it sounds that, and it kind of hasn't really. I mean, the people of Sydney will know it's on when it's on, but it hasn't really been given the kind of the ramp up. I guess because people aren't aware of what is involved in hosting, and I guess a lot of the community's taken it upon themselves to organise it.
Because what I really like about the festival is there's the Pride Amplified events, there's the arts festival, there's the sports festival. So you have organisations like World Gay Boxing Championships being able to be part of this. So I really see this as the community opening up to all our friends and allies to come and join us and partake in something, as well as celebrate World Pride and Mardi Gras.
I know, it's a shame that half of Oxford Street at the moment is a construction site. That's a little bit of foresight from the City of Sydney Council might have not
look
gone
like
astray.
A demolition site when they're done, mate. When Mardi Gras and World Pride converge on Oxford Street, I think the whole place will have to be a construction site. It's going to be one hell of a party. Have we got any international acts coming through?
I believe so, but
Oh, he's not going to say.
I'm not going to say.
Yeah.
So there are, I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah,
I'm going to get into trouble now because I should have known all of this.
Darren Hayes, was he Mardi Gras last year?
Yes.
Yeah, he was Mardi. There's been some big hitters just with Mardi Gras, so World Pride's going to be an interesting one. Have you ever attended any of these around the world?
Not a World Pride. I was in Sao Paulo last year for Sao Paulo Pride.
Right.
There were 3 million people on the city, but it was awesome. It was so much fun. But I'm biased. I still think Sydney does it best.
Yep. I mean, you just look at it now with Elton John in Australia. Yeah. He loves being in Sydney.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be. I mean, I haven't even considered this until this interview. I've not even considered the need to go and have a look at all this because it's going to be, like you said, biggest thing since the Olympics. Where are you timed to sit in this?
So we're beginning the first weekend.
Your first weekend?
Yeah. So they have other sporting events. One of my friends, she's organising a martial arts festival.
Yep.
The Sydney Silverbacks Wrestling, they're organising a different event. There's soccer, there's swimming festival. So please check out World Pride Sports and see what else is taking place and support the LGBTQ and ally sporting community.
Big year for Sydney. South by Southwest, World Pride, World Gay Boxing, as well as every grand final they host.
Yeah, who needs Melbourne?
No, we don't need them. Melbourne's not a queer capital in the scheme of things, is it?
No, it's the sporting capital.
Yeah, it's the sporting capital. Well, Martin's working tirelessly to make Sydney both the queer capital and sporting capital as one with World Gay Boxing. Excited to see some of the talent coming through here.
Yeah, very much so. And I want to give a shout out to a good boxing friend of mine, Kate McLaren, who I met a few days ago. Mm-hmm. What I like about the boxing community is giving back to the community. Mm-hmm. And Kate is setting up a not-for-profit called It's Her. Mm-hmm. And it's providing an online space for women to access resources, help in various different ways. Yeah. And you see many boxers support the community and give back. So I just wanted to give a big shout out to Kate for the work that she's doing. Yeah,
shout out to Kate. Shout out to everyone involved in the World Gay Boxing Championships. Everyone's invited except Manny Pacquiao.
I would, I'm going to invite Manny. I'm going to have a conversation. I'm going to say, you know what, Manny, you apologise. I accept your apology. Will you hold pads for me?
Okay. Yeah. He can put him in your corner. Are you going to fight?
No, I'm the promoter.
Okay. Yeah, that would be that kind of crooked boxing promoting we were talking about at the start of the show. But this is a not-for-profit, and all the best with it, man. Sounds like a great idea.
Thanks very much, my friends.